Welcome to day 45 of reading every single day for the rest of my life. Today we have The Fellowship of the King. Oh, The Sun. The Sun by J.J.R. Tolkien. I'm very excited. I'm at page 32, the middle of page 32. Out of what? Oh my god, 400. Yeah, out of about 400 pages. So here's kind of a little messed up, but it'll do. It'll do. All right, let's get it. I gotta get my phone set up wherever that sucker is. Wherever that son of a gun is. Somewhere around here. There he is. Okay. 30 minutes starting now. Day 45. Let's get it. Elves and dragons, I says to him. Cabbages and potatoes are better for me and you. Don't get getting mixed up in the business of your betters, or you'll land in trouble too big for you, I say to him. And I might say to others, he added with a look at the stranger and the miller. But the Goffer did not convince his audience. The legends of Bilbo's wealth was now too firmly fixed in the minds of the younger generation of hobbits. Ah, but he has likely enough been added to what he has brought, at first, argued the miller. Voicing common opinion. He's often away from home, and look at the outlandish folk that visit him. Dwarves coming at night, and that old wandering conjurer, Gandalf and all. You can say what you like, Goffer, but Bag End's a queer place, and its folk are queerer. And you can say that you like, but what about you know more of than you do of boating, Mr. Sandman, retorted the Goffer, disliking the miller even more than usual. If that's being queer, then we could do with a bit more queerness in these parts. There's some not far away that wouldn't offer a pint of beer to a friend, if they lived in a hole with golden claws, but they do things proper at Bag End. Our Sam says that everyone's going to be invited to the party, and there's going to be presents, mark you, presents for all, this very month as is. That very month was September, and as fine as you could ask, a day or two later a rumor, probably started by the acknowledgeable Sam, was spread about the theater that there were going to be fireworks, what is more, such as had not been seen in the Shire for nay of a century, not indeed since the old Took died. Days passed, and the day drew nearer. An odd-looking wagon laden with the odd-looking packages rolled into Hobbiton one evening and toiled up in the hill to Bag End. The startled hobbits peered out of lamp-pit doors to grape at it. It was driven by outlandish folk singing strange songs. Dwarves with long beards and deep hoods. A few of them remained at Bag End. At the end of the second week in September, a cart came in through Bywater from the direction of Brandywine Bridge in broad daylight. An old man was driving it all alone. He wore a tall, pointed blue hat, a long gray cloak, and a silver scarf. He had a long white beard and bushy eyebrows that stuck out beyond the brim of his hat. Small hobbit children ran after the cart all through Hobbiton and ran up the hill. It had a cargo of fireworks, as they rightly guessed. At Bilbo's front door, the old man began to unload. There were great bundles of fireworks, all of sorts and shapes, each labeled with a large red G, and the elf ruin. That was a Gandalf's mark, of course, and the old man was Gandalf the wizard, whose fame in the Shire was due mainly to his skill with fire, smokes, and lights. His real business was far more difficult and dangerous, but the Shire folk knew nothing about it. To them he was one of the attractions at the party, hence the excitement of the hobbit children. G for grand, they shouted, and the old man smiled. They knew him by sight, though he only appeared in Hobbiton occasionally, and never stopped along. But neither they nor any but the oldest of their elders had seen one of his firework displays. They now belonged to a legendary past. When the old man, helped by Bilbo and some dwarfs, had finished unloading, Bilbo gave a few pennies away. But not a single squib or cracker was forthcoming, at the disappointment of the onlookers. "Run away now," said Gandalf. "You will get plenty when the time comes." Then he disappeared inside with Bilbo, and the door was shut. The young hobbits stared at the door in vain for a while and then made off, feeling that day of the party would never come. Inside Bag End, Bilbo and Gandalf were sitting at the open window of a small room looking out west onto the garden. The late afternoon was bright and peaceful, the flowers glowing red and golden, snapdragons and sunflowers, and nasturtiums trailing all over the turf walls and peeping in at the round windows. "How bright your garden looks," said Gandalf. "Yes," said Bilbo, "I am very fond indeed of it, and all of this dear of old Shire, but I think I need a holiday." "You do mean to go with your plan, then?" "I do. I made up my mind months ago, and then I haven't changed it." "How bright your garden looks," said Gandalf. "Yes," said Bilbo, "I am very fond of it indeed, and all of the other dear old Shire, but I think I need a holiday." "You mean to go on with your plan, then?" "I do. I made up my mind months ago, and I haven't changed it." "Very well. It is no good saying any more. Stick to your plan. Your whole plan, mind us, and I hope it would turn out for the best, for you and all of us." "I hope so. Anyway, I mean to enjoy myself on Thursday, and I have my little joke." "Who will laugh, I wonder?" said Gandalf, shaking his head. "We shall see," said Bilbo. The next day carts rolled up to the hill, and still more carts. There might have been some grumbling about dealing locally, but that very last week orders began to pour out of the Bag End for every kind of provision, commodity, or luxury that could be obtained in Hobbiton or Bywater or anywhere in the neighborhood. People became enthusiastic, and they began to tick off the days of the calendar, and they watched eagerly for the postman, hoping for invitations. Before long, the invitations began pouring out, and the Hobbiton post office was blocked, and the Bywater post office was snowed under. The voluntarily assistant postmen were called for. There were a constant stream of them going up the hill, carrying hundreds of polite variations on "thank you," and "I shall certainly come." A notice appeared on the gate at Bag End: no admittance except on party business. Even those who had, or pretended to have, party businesses were seldom allowed inside. Bilbo was busy, writing invitations, ticking off answers, packing up presents, and making some private preparations of his own. From the time of Gandalf's arrival, he remained hidden from view. One morning the hobbits woke to find the large field south of Bilbo's front door covered with ropes and poles for tents and pavilions. A special entrance was cut into the bank leading to the road, and wide steps and a large white gate were built there. The 3 hobbit families of Bagshot Row, adjoining the field, were intensely interested and generally envied. Old Goffer Gamgee stopped even pretending to work in his garden. The tents began to go up. There was a specially large pavilion so big that the tree that grew in the field was right inside of it, and stood proudly near the end. At the head of the chief table, lanterns were hung on all of its branches. More promising still, to the hobbit's mind, an enormous open-air kitchen was erected in the north corner of the field. A draught of cooks from every inn and eating house for miles around arrived to supplement the dwarves and other odd folk that quartered at Bag End. Excitement rose to its height. Then the weather clouded. That was on Wednesday, the eve of the party. Anxiety was intense. Then Thursday, September the 2nd, actually dawned. The sun got up, the clouds vanished, flags were unfurled, and the fun began. Bilbo Baggins called it a party, but it was really a variety of entertainments rolled into one. Practically everybody living near was invited. A very few were overlooked by accident, but as they turned up all the same, that did not matter. Many people from other parts of the Shire were also asked, and there were even a few from inside the borders. Bilbo met the guest, and additions at the White Gate in person. He gave away presents to all and sundry. The latter were those who went out again by a back way and came in by the back gate. Hobbits give presents to other people on their own birthdays, not very expensive ones, as a rule, and not so lavishly as on this occasion, but it was not a bad system. Actually, a hobbiton in Bywater every day in the year was somebody's birthday, so that every hobbit in those parts had a fair chance of at least one present, at least once a week, but they never got tired of them. On this occasion, the presents were unusually good. The hobbit children were so excited that for a while they almost forgot about eating. There were toys of which they had never seen before, all beautiful and some obviously magical. Many of them had indeed been ordered a year before, and had come all the way from the mountain from Dale, and were of real dwarf make. When every guest had been welcomed and was finally inside the gate, there were songs, dances, music, games, and of course food and drink. There were 3 official meals: lunch, tea, and dinner, or supper. but lunch and tea were marked chiefly by the fact that those times all the guests were sitting down and eating together. At other times, there were merely lots of people eating and drinking continuously from Elvensis until 6030 when the fireworks started. The fireworks were by Gandalf. They were not only brought by him, but designed and made by him, and the special effects, set pieces, and flights of rockets were let off by him. But there were also a generous distribution of squibs, crackers, and wrappers, sparklers, torches, dwarf candles, elf fountains, goblin barkers, and thunderclaps. They were all superb. The art of Gandalf improved with age. There were rockets like a flight of scintillating birds singing with sweet voices. There were green trees with trunks of dark smoke, their leaves opened like a whole spring unfolding in a moment, and their shining branches dropped glowing flowers at dawn upon the entire summit, disappearing with a sweet scent just before they touched their upturned faces. There were fountains of butterflies that flew glittering into the trees. There were pillars of colored fires that rose and turned into eagles, or sailing ships, or flanks of flying swans. There was a red thunderstorm and a shower of yellow rain. There was a forest of silver spears that sprang suddenly into the air with a yell like embattled army, and that came down again into the water with a hiss like 100 hot snakes. And there was also one last surprise in honor of Bilbo, and it startled the hobbits exceedingly, as Gandalf intended. The lights went out. A great smoke went up. It shaped itself like a mountain seen in the distance, and began to glow at the summit. It spouted green and scarlet flames. And there was also one late surprise in honor of Bilbo, and it startled the hobbits exceedingly, as Gandalf intended. The lights went out. A great smoke went up. It shaped itself like a mountain and seen in the distance, and began to glow at the summit. It spouted green and scarlet flames. Out flew a red golden dragon. Not life-size, but terribly lifelike. Fire came out of its jaws. His eyes glared down. There was a roar, and he whizzed 3 times over the heads of the crowd. They all ducked, and many fell flat on their knees. The dragon passed like an express train, turned in somersault, and burst over Bywater with a deafening explosion. "That is the signal for supper," said Bilbo. The pain and alarm vanished at once, and the prostrate hobbits leaped to their feet. There was a splendid supper for everyone. For everyone, that is, except those who invited to the special family dinner party. This was held in the great pavilion with the tree. The invitations were limited to 12 dozen, a number also called by the hobbits one gross, though the word was not considered a proper use of the people, and the guests were selected from all the families to which Bilbo and Frodo were related, with the addition of few unrelated friends, such as Gandalf. Many young hobbits were included and present by parental permission, for hobbits were easy going with their children in the matter of setting up late, especially when there was a chance of them getting a free meal. Bringing up young hobbits took a lot of provender. There were many Bagginees and Boffins, and many Tooks and Brandybucks. There were various Grubbs, relations of Bilbo Baggins' grandmothers, and various Trubbs, connections of his Took grandfather, and a selection of Burroughses, Bulgers, Bracegirdles, Brockhouses, Goodbodies, and Hornblowers, and Proudfoots. Some of these were only very distantly connected with Bilbo, and some had hardly ever been in the Hobbiton before, as they lived in remote corners of the Shire. The Sackville Bagginees were not forgotten, although and his wife Lobelia were present. They disliked Bilbo and detested Frodo. But so magnificent was the invitation card, written in gold ink, that they had felt it was impossible to refuse. Besides, their cousin Bilbo had been specializing in food for many years, and his table had a high reputation. All the 144 guests expected a pleasant feast, though they'd rather dreaded the after-dinner speech of their host, an inevitable item. He was liable to drag in bits of what he have called poetry, and sometimes, after a glass or two, would allude to the absurd adventures of his mysterious journey. The guests were not disappointed. They'd had a very pleasant feast. In fact, an engrossing entertainment, rich, abundant, varied, and prolonged. The purchase of provisions fell almost to nothing throughout the district in the ensuing weeks. But as Bilbo's catering had depleted the stocks of most of the stores, cellars, and warehouses for miles around, that did not matter much. After the feast, more or less, came the speech. Most of the company were, however, now in a tolerant mood, at the delightful stage what they called filling up the corners. They were sipping their favorite drinks and nibbling at their favorite dainties, and their fears were forgotten. They were prepared to listen to anything and to cheer at every full stop. "My dear people," began Bilbo, rising in his place. "Hear, hear, hear," they shouted, and kept on repeating it in chorus, seeming reluctant to follow their advice. Bilbo left his place and went and stood on a chair under the illuminated tree. The light of the lanterns fell on his beaming face. The golden buttons shone on his embroidered silk waistcoat. They could all see him standing, waving one hand in the air. The other one was in his trouser pocket. "My dear Bagganese and Boffins," he began again, "and my dear Tooks and Brandybucks and Grubbs and Chubbs and Burrowses and Proudfoots." "Proud feet!" shouted an elderly hobbit from the back of the pavilion. His name, of course, was Proudfoot, and well merited. His feet were large, exceptionally furry, and both were on the table. "Proudfoots," repeated Bilbo. "Also, Proudfoots," repeated Bilbo. "Also, my good Sackville Bagganese that I welcome back at last to Bag End. Today is my 111th birthday. I am 11 today. Hooray, hooray! Many happy returns," they shouted, and they hammered joyously on the tables. Bilbo was doing splendidly. This was the sort of stuff they liked, short and obvious. "I hope you are all enjoying yourselves as much as I am." Deafening cheers, cries of yes and no, noises of trumpets and horns, pipes and flutes, and other musical instruments. There were, and has been said, many young hobbits present. Hundreds of musical crackers had been pulled. Most of them bore the marked doll on them, which did not convey much of most of the hobbits, but they did all agreed were marvelous crackers. They contained instruments small, but of perfect make and enchanting tones. Indeed, in one corner some of the young Tooks and Brandybucks, supposing Uncle Bilbo to have finished, since he had plainly said that all that was necessary, now got up on an impromptu orchestra, and began a merry dance tune. Master Everard Took and Miss Millet Brandybuck got up on a table, and with the bells on the hands began to dance the sprinkled ring, a pretty dance, but rather vigorous. But Bilbo had not finished. Seizing a horn from a youngster near by, he blew 3 loud hoots. The noise subsided. "I shall not keep you long," he cried. Cheers from all the assembly. "I have called you all together for a purpose." Something in the way that he said this made an impression. There was almost silence, and 1 or 2 of the Tooks picked up their ears. "Indeed, for 3 purposes. First of all, to tell you that I am immensely fond of you all, and that 11 years is too short of a time to live among such excellent and admirable hobbits." Tremendous outburst of approval. "I don't know what half of you half as well as I should like, and I like less than half of you, and half as well as you deserve." This was unexpected and rather difficult. There was some scattered clapping, but most of them were trying to look out as to see if it came to a compliment. What did Bilbo say? "I don't know half of you half as well as I should like, and I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve." Secondly, to celebrate my birthday, cheers again, I should say our birthday, for it is, of course, also the birthday of my heir and nephew Frodo. He comes of age and into his inheritance today. Some perfunctory clapping by the elders and some loud shouts of "Frodo, Frodo, jolly old Frodo" from the juniors. The Sackville Bagganese scowled and wondered what it meant by coming into his inheritance. "Together we score 144. Your numbers were chosen to fit this remarkable total, 1 gross, if I may use the expression." No cheers. This was ridiculous. Many of the guests, and especially the Sackville Bagganese, were insulted, feeling sure they had only been asked to fill up the required number like goods in a package. 1 gross indeed, vulgar expression. It is also, if I may be allowed to refer to ancient history, the anniversary of my arrival by barrel as Esgaroth at the Long Lake, though the fact that it was my birthday slipped my memory on that occasion. I was only 51 then, and my birthdays did not seem so important. The banquet was very splendid, however, though I had a very bad cold at the time. I remember and could only say thank you very much. Thank you very much. I now repeat it correctly. Thank you very much for coming to my little party. Obstinate silence. They all feared that a song or some poetry was now imminent, and they were all getting bored. Why couldn't he stop talking and let them drink his health? But Bilbo did not sing or recite. He paused for a moment. Thirdly and finally, he said, I wish to make an announcement. He spoke this last word so loudly and suddenly that everyone sat up who still could. I regret to announce that, though, as I said, 11 years is far too short a time to spend among you, this is the end. I am going. I am leaving. Now. Goodbye. He stepped down and vanished. There was a blinding flash of light, and the guests all blank, and they opened their eyes. Bilbo was nowhere to be seen. 144 flabbergasted hobbits sat back speechless. Old Odo Proudfoot removed his feet from the table and stamped. Then there was a dead silence, until suddenly, after several deep breaths, every Baggins, Boggin, Took, Brandybuck, Grubb, Chubb, Burrows, Bulger, Bracegill, Brockhouse, Goodbody, Hornblower, and Proudfoot began to talk at once. It was generally agreed. It was generally agreed that the joke was in very bad taste, and more food and drink were needed to cure the guests of shock and annoyance. He's mad. I always said so, was probably the most popular comment. Even the Tooks, with a few exceptions, thought Bilbo's behavior was absurd. For the moment, most of them took it for granted that his disappearance was nothing more than a ridiculous prank. But old Rory Brandybuck was not so sure. Neither age nor enormous dinner had clouded his wits, and he said to his daughter-in-law, Esmeralda, there's something fishy in this, my dear. I believe that Baggins is off again. That mad Baggins is off again, silly old fool. But why worry? He hasn't taken the victuals with him. He called loudly to Frodo to send the wine round again. Frodo was the only one present who had not said nothing. For some time he had sat silent beside Bilbo's empty chair and ignored all remarks and questions. He had enjoyed the joke, of course, even though he had not been in the know. He had difficulty in keeping from laughter at the indignant He had enjoyed the joke, of course. He had difficulty in keeping from laughter at the indignant surprise of the guest, but at the same time he felt deeply troubled. He realized suddenly that he loved the old hobbit dearly. Most of his guests went on eating and drinking and discussing Bilbo Baggins' oddities, past and present. But the Sackville Bagginese had already departed in wrath. Frodo did not want to have any more to do with the party. He gave orders for more wine to be served. Then he got up and drained his own glass silently to the health of Bilbo, and slipped out of the pavilion. As for Bilbo Baggins, even while he was making a speech, he had begun fingering the golden ring in his pocket. The magic ring that had kept secret for so many years. As he stepped down, he slipped it on his fingers, and he was never seen by any hobbit in Hobbittown again. He walked briskly back to his hole and stood for a moment listening with a smile to the din in the pavilion and to the sounds of merrymaking in other parts of the field. Then he went in. He took off his party clothes, folded up and wrapped his tissue paper, his embroidered silk waistcoat, and put it away. Then he put on quickly some old, untidy garments, and fastened round his waist a worn leather belt. On it he hung a short sword in a battered black long scabbard. From a locked drawer, smelling of mothballs, he took out an old cloak and hood. They had been locked up as if they were very precious, but they were so patched and weather-stained that their original color could hardly be guessed. It might have been a dark green. They were rather too large for him, but then went into his study and from a large strong-box took out a bundle wrapped in an old cloths and large bound manuscript, and also had a large bulky envelope. The book and bundle he'd stuffed into the top of the heavy bag that was standing there, already nearly full. Into the envelope he slipped his golden ring and its fine chain, and then sealed it, and addressed it to Frodo. At first he put it on the mantelpiece, but suddenly he removed it and stuck it in his pocket. At that moment the door opened and Gandalf came quickly in. "Hello," said Bilbo. "I wondered if you would turn up." "I'm glad to find you visible," replied the wizard, sitting down in a chair. I wanted to catch you and have a few final words. I suppose you feel that everything has gone off splendidly and according to plan?" "Yes, I do," said Bilbo. "Though that flash was surprising, it quite startled me, let alone the others. A little addition of your own, I suppose." "It was. You have wisely kept that ring secret all these years, and it seemed to me necessary to give your guest something else that would seem to explain your sudden vanishment, and I would spoil my joke. You are an interfering old busybody," laughed Bilbo, "and I expect you know best as usual." "I do, when I know anything. But I don't feel too sure about this whole affair. It has now come to the final point. You have had your joke, and alarmed or offended most of your relations, and given the whole Shire something to talk about for 9 days, or 99 more likely. Are you going any further?" "Yes, I am. I feel I need a holiday, a very long holiday, as I have told you before, probably a permanent holiday. I don't expect I shall return. In fact, I don't mean to, and I have made all arrangements." "I am old, Gandalf. I don't look it, but I am beginning to feel it in my heart of hearts. Well preserved, indeed," he snorted. "Why, I feel all thin, sort of stretched, if you know what I mean. Like butter that has been scraped over too much bread. That can't be right. I need a change, or something." Gandalf looked curiously and closely at him. "No, it doesn't seem right," he said thoughtfully. "No, after all, I believe your plan is probably the best." "Well, I've made up my mind anyway. I want to see some mountains again." "Gandalf, mountains. And then find somewhere where I can rest, in peace and quiet, without a lot of relatives prying around and a string of confounded visitors hanging on the bell. I might find somewhere where I can finish my book. I have thought of a nice ending for it, and he lived happily ever after at the end of his days." Gandalf laughed. I hoped he will. Gandalf laughed. "I hope he will, but nobody will read the book, however it ends." "I am Gandalf. I don't look it, but I am beginning to feel it in my heart of the hearts. Well preserved indeed," he snorted. "Why, I feel all thin, sort of stretched, if you know what I mean, like butter that has been scraped over too much bread. That can't be right. I need a change or something." Gandalf looked curiously and closely at him. "No, it does not seem right," he said thoughtfully. "No, after all, I believe your plan is probably the best." "Well, I have made up my mind anyway. I want to see mountains again, Gandalf. Mountains. And then find somewhere where I can rest, in peace and quiet, without a lot of relatives prying around and a string of confounded visitors hanging on the bell. I might find somewhere where I can finish my book. I have thought of a nice ending for it. And he lived happily ever after to the end of his days." Gandalf laughed. "I hope he will, but nobody will read the book, however it ends." "Oh, they may in years to come. Frodo has read some already, as far as it has gone. You'll keep an eye on Frodo, won't you?" "Yes, I will. 2 eyes as often as I can spare them. He would come with me, of course, if I asked him. In fact, he offered to once just before the party, but he doesn't really want to yet. I want to see the wild country again before I die, in the mountains. But he is still in love with the Shire, with woods and the fields of little rivers. He ought to be comfortable here. I am leaving everything to him, of course, except a few oddments. I hope he will be happy when he gets used to being on his own. It's time he was his own master now." "Everything?" said Gandalf. "The ring as well? You agreed to that, you remember?" "Well, yes, I suppose so," stammered Bilbo. "Where is it?" "In an envelope, if you must know," said Bilbo impatiently. "There on the mantelpiece." "Well, no. Here it is in my pocket." He hesitated. "Isn't that odd now?" he said softly to himself. "Yet after all, why not? Why shouldn't it stay there?" Gandalf looked again very hard at Bilbo, and there was a gleam in his eyes. "I think, Bilbo," he said quietly, "I should leave it behind. Don't you want to? Well, yes and no. Now it comes to it. I don't like parting with it at all, I may say, and I don't really see why I should. Why do you want me to? He asked, and a curious change came over his voice. It was sharp and with suspicious annoyance. You are always badgering me about my ring, but you have never bothered me about the other things that I got on my journey. No, but I had to badger you, said Gandalf. I wanted the truth. It was important. Magic rings are, well, magical, and they are rare and curious. I was professionally interested in your rings, and you may say, and I still am. I should like to know where it is, if you go wandering again. Also, I think you have had it quite long enough. You won't need it any more, Bilbo, unless I am quite mistaken. Bilbo flushed and there was an angry light in his eyes. His kindly face grew hard. Why not? He cried. And what business is it of yours anyway, to know what I am to do with my own things? It is my own. I found it. It came to me. Yes, yes, said Gandalf, but there is no need to get angry. If I am, it is your fault, said Bilbo. It is mine, I tell you. My own. I am precious. Yes, my precious.
Hey!
Damn.
Hey!
Fuck. I love this book, guys. This book is amazing. So yeah, that was day 45. See you guys day 46. Let's go.